Hello, and welcome to another episode of Break the Cycle with me, your host, Joshua Smith. Hope everyone's having a wonderful Thursday. It's almost the weekend. You've almost made it through another full week of probably hell at work. I know how you guys roll. So thank you for coming and hanging out with me. I know the shows have been few and far between. Life is just crazy. I spent some time at PorcFest recently. And then I came home, and we've had just one thing after another. For you guys who've been following me online, of course, we have to move. So the old school basement studio will be changing soon to another basement studio. But the house that we have been approved for has like an entire like Tim Pool style room set up just for me to make a new podcast studio. So we're going to be taking the show to another level. Of course, up until then, we'll be packing, getting things ready to go. We move on August 13th, so we got about a month and a couple of days. And so we'll be packing and getting all this stuff packed up. Of course, I'll pack up the studio probably pretty close to last, and then try to get it set up as quick as I can in my new place so that I can at least start doing shows. So they will be few and far between for a while, but once we get the new studio set up, it's going to be a whole new dawn for Break the Cycle. Probably no more Couchstreams. I know you guys will be very upset, but I think we've trolled that into the ground for the last 2 years or a year and a half, and it's time to move on to some desk streams. We're going to be more professional, Joshua, if you guys know what I mean. Guys, of course, please go check out my sponsors, toplobster.com, the man, the myth, the legend, my good friend and partner on Break the Cycle, where you can get all kinds of great hats, tees, hoodies, backpacks, with all of the great art that you see on my show. Of course, all of the other art that he puts out as well. You can get all of that for a 10% discount by going to toplobster.com and using BTC at checkout in the checkout code, or you guys can join the Patreon, become a member of the YouTube channel or the Subscribe Star, where you can get into a very sought after private Discord server and get all of Top Lobster's new gear up to 2 weeks before it goes to the general public at like a 30% discount. So really good stuff. Kind of pays for itself if you're a low tier Patreon subscriber. It's very good stuff. Of course, executive producers of the show, anthemplanning.com, for all your emergency and crisis planning needs. Check them out today. See what they can do for your business, home, or personal life. They're doing a wonderful job that the government has historically sucked at, much cheaper and much more efficiently. And of course, other sponsor of the show is not have video for us yet, but I kept saying I was going to get video. Of course, they may not keep sponsoring the show for very much longer, but if you're listening to this on the audio portion, you will be hearing a good ad from them as well. Guys, we've got a great show for you tonight. I'm very, very excited. I went to PorcFest. I want to say it was like 3 weekends ago now. Had the time of my life. Is absolutely amazing. Got to hang out with all the New Hampshire libertarians. I don't think anybody asked me the whole time I was there to move to New Hampshire. That's a lie. Everybody I met told me it was time for me to move to New Hampshire. But I got to meet all kinds of great people. I got debated by David Friedman, which was pretty wild. I got to hang out with a lot of good friends from the New Hampshire Libertarian Party, and it was just a really, really good time. Got to hang out with Scott Horton. Of course, Dave Smith couldn't make it, but one of the highlights was I met a gentleman there that is part of a group called the U.S. Freedom Flyers. It is a bunch of people that are really upset with the aviation community and the mandates for the vaccines. And he is one of, if not one of the greatest spokesmen I've seen recently. And as the vice chair of the Libertarian Party, I was very excited to sit down and talk with somebody who's part of this great program that is telling, the status quo to go, kick rocks. And his name is Mr. Josh Yoder. Sir, how you doing tonight?
Hey, good, Josh. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I really am happy that I got to meet you at PorcFest. It was a good time. We got to sit down and do a live podcast with the chair of the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was amazing. We had a really good time over that 2-day period. It was absolutely incredible just to come together with like so many people who understand the issues that are happening with this country. And, we're all fighting things on a different level. We're fighting vaccine mandates. We're fighting totalitarianism on a lot of different levels, which everything comes together with what the Libertarian Party is talking about, which is ultimately personal freedom. And I think that's something that every person in this country can get behind because, what we've seen with the two-party system in this country, the Democrats and the Republicans, they are both the like the same snake with two different heads.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, as somebody who campaigned for Ron Paul in 2008, I was on his campaign team. Come full circle, 2 years ago, he endorsed me for chairman of the Libertarian National Committee. It was really wild for me. I kind of learned this, well, it's been over a decade now ago, when I watched the Republican Party, who I had been a member of for a long time, kind of go after Ron Paul and have some of his delegates arrested. And I started really feeling like I didn't have a home there anymore. And so, yeah, I've been watching, it doesn't even have to be about partisanship, but it's just like, all the worst policies that we see in this country seem to find bipartisan support, right? The endless wars, the Federal Reserve stuff, the financial stuff, these big pork pack bills that are constantly being passed. It always seems to get enough support from both sides of the aisle to get passed, and at the detriment of the middle class, and especially. It's tearing us apart, and so I'm glad to hear more and more people start saying that. Of course, as the vice chair of the Libertarian Party, I have some interests there as well. But why don't we start off talking about U.S. Freedom Flyers and what that is and why that came to be?
Sure. So what we'll do here just initially is talk about a bit like how we got started and why we exist and what we're doing now. So back on August 6th, I was sitting in a hotel room in Chicago, and I saw a post that a friend of mine made on Facebook regarding freedom issues. And I reached out to him, and this was right after United Airlines had come out with the mandate. They said, we're going to have a vaccine mandate regardless of a federal mandate coming down the pipes. I have been like very actively involved in U.S. politics for the better part of 15 years. And when I saw that, I absolutely realized at that point that we were facing a federal mandate, and decided that we needed to do something as airline employees within our industry to make sure that we were prepared for when a federal mandate did come down the pipes. So that's how it started. It had very humble beginnings. I wrote a letter to Stu Peters on August 11th. I went on the Stu Peters show, and I discussed the issue, right, surrounding vaccine mandates and how I felt about it. Very fortunately, that happened. Because about a month and a half later, we did in fact face a federal mandate. On November 22nd, which was 2 days prior to the cutoffs that the airlines and the federal government had given us on November 24th, the day before Thanksgiving, saying, like, you have to get the shot or lose your job. We filed a federal lawsuit against the Biden administration, challenging the federal contractor clause of the vaccine mandate. That wasn't the most important thing that we did. The most important thing that we did is the fact that we stood up and we said no. We caused so many disruptions. You saw the meltdowns that happened at Southwest and American Airlines in late November of 2021. And the airlines told you that had to do with weather. There were all these disruptions that were happening. Flights were canceled by the thousands. That had nothing to do with weather. That had everything to do with airlines mistreating their employees, and employees who were no longer motivated to show up to work. That was not something that we organized. That was just something that happened by default, because as Americans, we are freedom-loving people, and we don't stand for tyranny or totalitarianism. That cost the airlines hundreds of millions of dollars, which sent the CEOs off to DC, ultimately getting the vaccine mandates pushed off to January 4th, which gave us more time to organize. And by the time we came to the January 4th deadline, we had most of the airlines, all except for about 4 of them, accepting religious and medical exemptions. So that was a huge win for us. That was a definitive win for the American people who stand up and say no, say, listen, we're going to stand up for our rights. We're not going to bend to your mandates, to your totalitarianism. And so since post January 4th, moving forward, we have kind of moved into a different phase, which is the accountability phase of U.S. Freedom Flyers, which is really focused on bringing litigation against not just the airlines who completely violated our rights, but also against the FAA. And the reason that this is important, and I think a lot of people are missing this currently, like why this is so consequential, is the fact that the FAA, the policies that they set, have an effect on the civil aviation authorities around the world, in the policies and procedures that they put into place. And so, what we know from this is that like the FAA allowed these toxic jabs to be authorized without ever doing any long-term safety studies whatsoever. And many civil aviation authorities around the world, basically all of them, actually did exactly the same thing. So what we're doing is we're bringing litigation against the federal government, against the FAA, because we know that if we change the policy here, we are changing the policies around the world, because other civil aviation authorities around the world follow suit as to what the FAA does. And that's why this is so critically important. This is not an employee issue. This is an issue for passengers, and this is an issue for every person in this country and every person around the world. Because if we could stop it, if we could prove that the shot is bad for employees at the airline and at the FAA level, we are proving that it's bad for passengers, flight attendants, everybody else around the world, and we do everything that we can in our power to stop this, because they are currently trying to vaccinate our kids, and we know the deaths and all the things surrounding this. Like, it's absolutely terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's before I met you and really learned about freedom flyers, U.S. freedom flyers, and all that stuff, I had already kind of heard some stories of pilots who had just recently got the jab and then passed out at the wheel, or like the gentleman who landed blacked out and didn't even realize he had landed his plane. I mean, who have you been working with, and what stories have you heard?
Sure. So just a couple of stories, just to fill your viewers in on exactly what's happening. So back in February of 2021, Cody Flint, he's an agricultural pilot from the Delta in Mississippi. Um, he thought that the FAA had done their proper. He thought that they had followed like their rules and procedures, right? And had like verified this vaccine and had made sure that it was safe and effective. And he went out and he got his first Pfizer shot, and we're mandated to wait 48 hours after getting the first shot uh, before we can fly again. And so he did exactly that. About 50 hours after getting the first Pfizer shot, he took off in his aircraft, which is the largest single engine aircraft in the world. And he takes off, and he was spreading a load of fertilizer on a field down the Mississippi Delta. As soon as he took off, he developed tunnel vision. He realized that he had a problem, but he thought it was something that was minor and that he would be able to continue his day and probably go to like see his family doctor at the end of the day, right? He gets to the end of the field. He goes to pull up to clear some power lines, and both of his inner ears ruptured. He didn't know what was happening at the time, but he lost all equilibrium. He looks at a 4-lane highway that was right next to him, thought he was going to land on the highway, but very quickly realized that there were cars on the highway, and landing there would have killed a lot of people. So he decided not to do that. He looked back towards the airport, which was about 7 miles away. That's the last thing that Cody Flint remembers. The next thing that he remembers is waking up, being back in his normal parking spot at the airport, having no idea how he got there. He's being pulled out by the ground crew, and he obviously goes and seeks medical attention. And Cody Flint right now is one of the most one of the most important people that we have, like, in this, with this situation, because he has like 2 doctors here in the United States, and also 2 doctors in Canada, plus 2 international medical studies that have conclusively said that the first Pfizer shot is the reason that he experienced this medical condition. And he is one of many. Greg Pearson is another one. He's a major airline captain. He got his first Pfizer shot, and within just like 5 or 6 hours of getting the first Pfizer shot, he went to bed. He experienced a major cardiac event, and he's actually done a press release. He's done multiple press releases, and he has said, if I experienced my adverse vaccine reaction, while I was flying, while I was on landing, landing at a major airport with like 40 airplanes lined up next to me on the taxiway, he said the outcome of that flight could have been very different. It could have very adversely affected a lot of people's lives. And then more importantly, on April 9th, we have Captain Bob Snow, American Airlines 1067, flying from Denver to Dallas Fort Worth. Captain Snow flew that flight. He got vaccinated in November under duress, per his own words. He has a video. You can just look up Captain Bob Snow on the internet, and he talks about how he was forced vaccinated under duress, and he was having issues from the point of vaccination on, which he thought were gastrointestinal issues. It turns out they were in fact cardiac. And Captain Snow, after landing in Dallas, 6 minutes after touchdown, they pull into the gate. He sets the parking brake. The first officer goes back to the laboratory, which is very normal after a flight. Captain Snow stands up to collect his bags to move on to the next flight, and he collapses in the flight deck from cardiac arrest. And it was a deplaning passenger actually that noticed him. And very fortunately for Captain Snow, there was a nurse and a Navy corpsman on board who pulled him out of the flight deck into the jet bridge. They performed CPR on him. They hooked him up with the AD. They had to shock him 3 times to bring him back to life. And when he woke up about 24 hours later in the ICU in Dallas, he gave me a call and he said, "Look, Josh, I need help." And he said, like, does U.S. Freedom Flyers have a team? Like, what can you do for me? And so we immediately assembled a team, and people like Dr. Peter McCullough, Lieutenant Colonel Pete Chambers, Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, and other people who are very large names in the freedom movement, advised the situation surrounding Captain Snow. And these are just a few of the stories. These are not. This is not a conclusive list. There are many more like them. These are just a few of the brave ones that are willing to speak out.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we hear more and more about every day. And, probably they'll demonetize the show. And, it's like, how many of these do we need to see to stop saying that it's rare and that it's everything's safe and it's rare for that to happen? I mean, I when you have pilots doing it randomly in the sky or coming down or after they've landed, and it's not normal. That's not a normal thing. That's not something you hear about happening 3 or 4 or 5 times a year. It's something that you might hear about happening once every 6 years, right? Typically. And so it's pretty wild to think that kind of stuff just continues to happen, and people keep screeching in our face, telling us that, that's just normal and it's very rare and this and that. But another story you told me about when we met at PorcFest was Dr. Teresa Long. That's who it was? And you were telling me a story about her being kind of blackballed for her stuff. What was that again? Can you explain that for everybody?
Yeah, totally. So Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long is probably one of the bravest people that I know. So just to give a bit of background on her, she is a very senior Army flight surgeon that oversees the Army Fort Rucker flight training base for the U.S. Army. So down at Fort Rucker, this is where Army pilots go through their preliminary flight training with the U.S. Army. And what she noticed back in early 2021, after the shot rollout, she was seeing a lot of patients that were having things like myocarditis and pericarditis. So just to back up a bit on that, she is an expert in something called the DMED database. The DMED database is considered to be one of the most comprehensive medical databases in the world, right? That encompasses the entire Department of Defense. What she noticed was when the shots started rolling out in 2021, in January of 2021 to October of 2021, which is like a 10-month period, she was seeing things like 300% increases in myocarditis and pericarditis and cardiac arrests, blood clots, strokes, 1,135% increase in neurological conditions, between like 300% and 400% increase in spontaneous abortions and like fertility issues, among thousands of other issues. Right. Those are just a few of like the very pertinent ones that actually like affect pilots. So what she did is she found an attorney and she came out as a Senate whistleblower. And she went to Senator Johnson, and they held a hearing, and they exposed all of this data that was coming out of the DMED database. So what's really important that people understand is that DMED database is literally the product. It is the database that many large international medical studies are based off of, right? So this is not like some small database, this is not something minuscule. Long story short, that came out. There was then a second hearing, and Senator Johnson looked at all the data that was coming out, and he sent letters to Secretary Austin. He said, preserve all of this data because we absolutely need to do like a Senate hearing, a congressional investigation, what have you, into what's happening in the military. Teresa Long called me very shortly soon thereafter. One day, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, And she said, you need to get to you need to get down to Fort Rucker, and please do so quickly. So what we discovered was that Secretary Austin did not he didn't follow the orders of Senator Johnson. And the people that actually control the DMED database at the highest levels of the Department of Defense were manipulating the data. So the way the data works, there was like 5 years of data, right? 2016 to 2020, to where most of these disease processes were semi-level across those years. I mean, small percentage changes up and down, right? But then when you get to 2021, after the rollout of the vaccine mandates, you saw these massive spikes by like 400, 1,000%, right?
Right.
And the only thing that changed during that time period was the introduction of the vaccines in the military. So what the Department of Defense did, which is really ironic, rather than saying, look, we had a glitch, and lowering the numbers in 2021, they tried to raise the numbers of the previous 5 years. So they raised those numbers, but ironically, they missed a lot of disease processes in that process because they did it so hurriedly. And so when you actually graph out everything that has been laid out in the DMED database, it's very obvious that there was manipulations. I sat there in real time with Teresa Long, and I watched it. I watched it happen, and I have that data. I have the pre-data, and I also have the post data from manipulation. And it's not just me. It's not just Teresa Long. We have literally sent this out to many different attorneys across the country, many different politicians. So regardless of what happens to us, like, the data is out.
Right.
It's out. And so there is no taking out one person. There's no threatening one person to bury this data, because we have it. We have it. It's out everywhere. And so what we have now is definitive proof that the government and the Department of Defense actually manipulated the DMED data, trying to cover up the adverse reactions of the shots. And this should be a national news story, but unfortunately, like, no national media organization in this country wants to cover it. So this has become a story that is talked about on alternative media, and by that happening, most Americans don't realize what actually happened here. I mean, this doesn't just affect pilots. It just doesn't just affect people in the military. This is affecting everybody. It just happens to be that the database where these things are documented is a military database.
Right.
And so all the deaths and adverse reactions and everything that we're seeing, this is something that affects us all.
Right.
But there's a giant cover up in play.
Well, and let's be honest, the corporate legacy news media is the enemy of the people. We know that.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that. Even the people who act like they don't know that probably mostly know that. It's it's been a long time now where we can look to these big media outlets and know they don't have our best interests at heart. It's all about what makes them a money, whose narrative they're pushing, and it has nothing to do with the truth in journalism anymore. That's why we look to independent media now, and that's why we, some of these independent media organizations, even like Joe Rogan is getting more viewers than CNN, and if he puts Alex Jones on there, it triples. So it's pretty wild how that happens. P Nord 87 Perry, thanks for the $20 super chat. Greg James, thanks, man. I love you too, big guy. Shannon Lee says thanks for all of you. Both are doing great stuff. $10 super chat, thanks. Hey, so let's talk a little more about the litigation, man. What's going on currently with your lawsuit?
So our primary focus at the moment right now is going after the regulators, because we obviously have the airlines who mandated these vaccines, and they did so like completely illegally, against the Nuremberg Code, against black letter law of the United States. But what's more important than that is the fact that the FAA, which is supposed to be the regulator, which maintains the safest aerospace system in the world, that's their charter, right?
Right.
They allowed it to happen. So, speaking to people within the FAA, these are conversations that I have every single day, including today. I'm speaking to some people who are like the highest levels within the FAA that are talking about the political pressure that came down from the Department of Transportation, from Pete Buttigieg. These people are the ones that allowed it to happen. So let me just give you an example. So 10, 15 years ago, it used to be that as an airline pilot, you had to retire at the age of 60 years old. And then they decided they wanted to move that retirement age up because they were having staffing issues, and they wanted to move it up to the age of 65. Well, the FAA said, look, this could potentially affect safety of airline travelers, right? And so for a 7-year period, people between the age of 61 and, like, let's say 63, they could not fly in the same flight deck together. And this was to ensure that there was like no impact on safety by increasing the retirement age of pilots within the airline industry. So that's the typical level of scrutiny that is given to any changes within the FAA. Like, for instance, I can't take NyQuil tonight and go fly tomorrow. I can't take basic antihistamines and go fly. But when it came to the COVID-19 vaccines, there were zero long-term safety studies done, none whatsoever. Everything was under emergency use authorization. And yet on December 12th, the FAA came out and said, you know what, we encourage all pilots to get the COVID-19 vaccine. So this is completely counterculture as to what has happened in the FAA for the past 60, 80 years, right? And what we're seeing now is these incredible adverse reactions. We're seeing things like myocarditis, pericarditis, heart attacks, blood clots, strokes, and neurological conditions. Those are probably like the largest things that specifically affect pilots. And no one wants to talk about it. So what we're seeing here is this is criminal liability between the FAA, the Department of Transportation, the airlines who mandated the jab, and the unions who did not defend the employees that pay them union dues for representation, right? So the unions are ultimately autonomous political organizations who absolutely do not represent their members. And so what you're seeing here, and then also the pilots, right? So if a pilot comes forward, they're de-incentivized from coming forward with a medical condition, because if they do so, they're looking at losing their flight medical, which is essentially synonymous with a pilot's license, right?
Right.
Like if you lose one, you don't have the other. And so you have pilots who don't want to come forward. They're experiencing issues like chest pain and neurological conditions. They don't want to come forward because if they do, they're going to be placed on long-term disability, which is a fraction of the money that they're going to make as an airline pilot, right?
About a third.
And so
so,
essentially everybody has liability here, and no one wants to come forward. And so the question that we're facing right now is how do we address this issue? How do we solve this what is ultimately a safety issue for the flying public? How do we do it? Because everyone has civil and criminal liability at this point.
Right. Absolutely. And that makes a ton of sense. And then, of course, holding these people liable, right? That's kind of what this lawsuit's about, and trying to push the liability on the people who deserve the liability and deserve to pay out for the issues that they've created by forcing these things on unwilling participants, for sure. Now, I know you work in the airline industry, and we won't talk about where you work or whatever. But I mean, has this negatively affected you and your family personally? I mean, is that something that you've had to deal with as far as like losing your job or anything like that?
Yeah, it totally has. I'm actually very fortunate in the fact that I didn't lose my job. They accepted my religious exemption, and this was on January 3rd. Like right prior to the cutoff. That would not have happened had we not all stood up and shown them that we weren't going to go along with their plans. What I can tell you is that leading up to that date in November 24th, we saw a rash of suicides. We saw a lot of people losing their homes. We saw, obviously families being broken apart, over the issue. So there's like so much damage has been done, so much emotional damage specifically. And so these airlines are completely liable. There's like criminal and civil liability to go around to everyone. And that is something that we're absolutely pursuing. And as you can imagine, this takes years. The legal system does not move quickly. The number one focus that we're doing right now, and that we're specifically working on at U.S. Freedom Flyers as a founding member of the Global Aviation Advocacy Coalition, which is groups just like ours all around the world, we are going after the regulators, because it was the allowance of the regulators to allow this to happen that allowed the airlines to mandate it. So we believe that if we can change the rules and policies of the regulator, we can change the laws to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And they're already talking about things like monkeypox. So, Joe Biden has come out publicly and he said there will be another pandemic. And the airlines and the regulators and all these people have absolutely shown us what they will do. They will do it again. If we don't stop them, they will do it again. So this is a time for freedom-loving people across this country to get behind the employees here at the airlines that are fighting, because the fight that we're in is not a national fight. This is an international fight. And if we can change this here, if we can prove it's bad for pilots, we prove it's bad for passengers, for flight attendants, we prove it's bad for your children and everyone. And so that is ultimately the goal. This is so much bigger than just the airline industry.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's all industries. And I think we talked a little bit about this when I interviewed you at PorkFest. My own personal job, we were told that we had to do the same thing. And we were later on given the opportunity to do a religious or medical exemption. And so my division was like, hey, let's do this, and I was like, no, I don't want to. I shouldn't have to lie to not have to take a medical intervention for something that I don't want. I mean, that's not how freedom and liberty in this country work. And so I organized them to say no, and we didn't turn in religious exemptions, and we didn't turn in these medical exemptions, and 3 days before we were supposed to be walked off site, they ended the mandate because they're going to lose the whole division. I mean, every single person in the division, but not everyone's that lucky, right? Like a lot of places, 97% of their division got it, and it was like, what are you going to do at that point? Because we're all replaceable at the end of the day to a lot of these companies, right? And if we're saying no, then we're just slowing down productivity for them. And but it really becomes a much bigger thing when that person is taking hundreds of people's lives into their hands during their job, and it should at least be held to a different standard in that specific job, and other jobs like it as well. So, how optimistic are you guys about the litigation?
We're gonna win.
Yeah, that's what I like to hear.
I would say the most disheartening thing that I've seen lately, we'll start with that first, right? It is the fact that not more people stood up and said no.
Right.
That is the number one most important thing that you can do, because as a society, when you stand together and you say no, that completely removes the power from these overlords who are trying to force these ridiculous mandates on us. But in absence of that, what you can do is you can come back after the fact with a very small minority, and you can bring litigation, because these companies and the government have violated the most basic laws that we have in this country. We have rights in this country. And that is precisely what the globalists are trying to remove from us, is our rights. And so it is absolutely imperative, regardless of whether you took the shot or you didn't take the shot. Quite frankly, I don't care. What I do care about is that you stand up for your rights, and that you stand up for the U.S. Constitution, and that you fight back, because we actually have the tools to fight back, and we need to do it. And we need your help at U.S. Freedom Flyers. Like we are a grassroots organization, 100% volunteer. None of us take a salary. When you donate to U.S. Freedom Flyers, that money is going to the litigation, and a very small part to like operating costs, things like website, right? When you donate here, like all of us are fighting for you. We're not fighting for just airline employees. We are fighting for this nation. We are fighting for the world. And you look at organizations like the Global Aviation Advocacy Coalition. You can find us on Substack. You can find us on Twitter. We're working on a website. But that is a very powerful force. We have over 30 international attorneys now who are working on this. And we are now being talked about in the European parliaments, at the FAA and U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate. This is actually becoming a conversation. And when we can prove that this is bad for pilots, we prove that it is bad for everyone.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree, man. And I certainly hope that you guys pull through. And I mean, so the airline industry, are they looking at bringing back the mandates still? I mean, is there still a timeline on them trying to force that again?
They will do whatever they can get away with. Obviously, everyone has seen the massive meltdowns that have happened with the with scheduling over the past couple of months, quite frankly. And that is a perfect storm that has culminated, that is causing massive issues. So starting in 2020, we were already experiencing and anticipating a 10-year pilot shortage. And the reason for that is the mandatory retirement age of 65, right? This is something that's been long anticipated. But then you threw 2020 in there, and you threw the COVID crisis, and all the nonsense surrounding that. Obviously, passengers weren't flying, and so the airlines entered into a period where they had like essentially like massive financial bleeding, and in trying to curb that financial bleeding, they offered early retirement programs for their most senior employees, and it really depended on the airlines, like how many people they let go, but anywhere between like 5 and 15% of the most senior and the most expensive employees at those airlines. And they were looking forward. They essentially miscalculated. They thought that travel demand was going to take a lot longer to come back than what it actually did. And so they let a percentage of people go from the most senior positions at the airline. This includes like pilots, flight attendants, ground staff, like all these people, right? And they were looking at how many people they could train annually, in their training pipeline, like what they were capable of. But what they didn't calculate was the number of vaccine injuries that were going to occur. So while they may have been closer to staying on track had there been no vaccine injuries, we've now introduced these vaccine injuries into the equation, and they can no longer staff. They literally don't have the pilots. They don't have the flight attendants. They don't have the people to staff the operation that is required to fly these flights. And so what you're seeing now is all these cancellations that are happening. These are crew cancellations, and in addition to that, what's really disturbing is that some of these airlines are actually defrauding passengers because they're coding these cancellations as weather cancellations, which means that they have no requirement to book you things like hotels, and it affects like the booking codes, like the rebooking codes, and like how they rebook you for your future travel. They're telling you it's weather, but in fact it's crew, and I have definitive proof of that. I can 100% prove this in a court of law, and this is fraud. And so they are at this point. They are defrauding passengers. Not all of them, and not all of them all the time, but it is happening, and I have proof of it. And so this is like more litigation that's going to be brought by passengers, and it's very well deserved. I mean, these airlines have done idiotic things over the past couple of years, like vaccine mandates. That was completely stupid. That was like one of the most idiotic things they've ever done. And so it's a culmination. This is not like one issue that is causing this giant problem, but it's essentially what I would consider to be a perfect storm that has all come together. And I don't think it's going to be an issue that's resolved anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that, man. It's just the whole thing is just still crazy to me, man. Level Zero, thanks for the $5 super chat. He said, were there any airlines that were helping fight these mandates, or were they all lockstep with the regulators?
There were no airlines that were helping fight this. Yeah, they all suck. There are a few that suck less than others. And what I will tell you is that U.S. freedom flyers, we have had multiple billionaires, multiple very wealthy people that have reached out to us, and they are seeking non-vaccinated pilots to fly their private jets, including the most recent call that I got, which is about 10 days ago, from a very large company looking for over 150 unvaccinated pilots. And so the question that you have to ask yourself is, why are these large private companies asking for unvaccinated pilots? I'm not a genius here, but I'm just gonna throw this out. I think that's very interesting. That very wealthy people, large companies would be asking for these folks. And so I've been tasked with the goal of finding unvaccinated pilots who would like to leave the airlines and go work for these large corporations. I mean, it's I think the writing is on the wall. There's so much data out there, people realize what's going on.
That's
And if you're Bill Gates or Donald Trump or some of these other folks, you don't feel particularly comfortable flying in your aircraft, if you know that you have two vaccinated pilots up front.
It's just wild to me, man. So they talked a little bit about Level Zero talked about other airlines that might have helped. But have you guys gotten any political support? Of course, Senator Ron Johnson. But have you had any other political support at all?
No, outside of that, it's been very low. But what I can tell you, it is starting to build, and we're starting to get international political support. So with the European Parliament, there have been hearings just over like the past 3 weeks that have been incredible. And there was a German parliamentary member that just came out a couple of days ago that actually was on Steve Bannon, and she's been talking about this issue. And there's more and more, because U.S. Freedom Flyers is one group within the national groups, right? There's probably 15 or 20 of us actually, that are all members of the Global Aviation Advocacy Coalition. And so all of us working together, we're obviously going to our regulators, and that's one of our primary focuses, going after the regulators. And this is starting to make political news like all across the world, even in Australia. Australia, Germany, France. France was a big one. They actually had some vaccine injured employees that got in front of the parliament in France. So the truth is starting to come out. Like there is only a certain amount of time that you can keep the genie in the bottle. This is not going to happen forever. Right. And when the truth comes out, I think there's going to be a revolution. When people truly start to understand what's actually happened, forget what this has done to like the safety of air travel. This goes way beyond this. This goes like this is your personal health. This is your family's health.
Right.
And so I think the pendulum is starting to swing, and it's going to swing. And when it swings the opposite direction, I think there's going to be an absolute mutiny of citizens walking away from government.
Right. Well, and I just saw recently that the first vaccine injury lawsuit to be won happened in Britain. I can't remember her name, but this just happened like 2 weeks ago, I think 3 weeks ago. And so that's going to set up a huge precedent, at least in England or in Britain, where that first one was won, because now all the other people are going to feel a little more comfortable coming forward saying, hey, this happened to me. I'm also going to seek legal damages. We need that to start happening around the world. That's really what it's going to take. And so it's great to have someone like you and the U.S. Freedom Flyers kind of leading that charge, because there's people out there that won't do anything without someone else leading the charge first. And hopefully you guys start the domino effect, man. We're definitely getting towards the end of this thing, but before we go, I want to know: is there anything else out there that you want people to know about the Freedom Flyers and this mission? And where can people find you, support you, listen to you, all that great stuff?
The number one thing that I want people to understand is the work that we're doing is not just for airline employees, and it's not just for airline passengers. What we're doing right now is we are shining a very bright light on a healthy subset of the population, which is airline pilots, right? Which makes it easier to definitively prove vaccine injuries, right? These are people that get physicals, every year or twice a year over the age of 40, right? And so once we can prove that it's bad for airline pilots, we prove that it's bad for airline passengers, we prove that it's bad for your kids, right? So we see this as probably one of the most consequential industries within the world to actually fundamentally change the entire narrative surrounding the COVID-19 vaccine shots. So I would ask you to support us. Please go to usfreedomflyers.org, and if you can, please click on the donate tab. Like I said, we're all volunteer. We are fighting. We're fighting not just for us. This isn't about enriching employees. This is about stopping the shots. This is about stopping mandates. And more importantly, this is about the preservation of personal freedom. That's ultimately what we're about. And so if you can support us by helping us fight, you are helping yourself in the fight. If this is something that you care about, if you are a nurse that was fired, or whatever industry that you work in, if this affected you, by helping us win this fight, what we're going to do through the discovery phase of these lawsuits is actually bring out the truth, because we're partnered with people like the COVID Summit doctors, right? Thousands of doctors across the world. We have many international attorneys, all these different organizations, including like researchers at insurance organizations or insurance groups, right? That are they're giving us very interesting data about how many people have been dying since the rollout of the vaccines in January of 2021 specifically. And so we're putting all this data together. And putting this data together becomes an educational process. And this is something that is forced through the litigation process and forced through the discovery phase, which is going to be educational to not just the American public, but to people all around the world. And so while we're very focused on the airline issue, it's far greater than that.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I just appreciate the hell out of the work you're doing, man. I think it's very important. I'm very happy to have you on the show. I do have one more very serious question before you go, though, Josh. We were going to do this show last week, and we had to reschedule because you were on your way to, I believe you said Georgia. Okay.
Yeah.
And then on July 5th, the Georgia Guidestones were blown up. So where were you on July 5th, Josh?
I was actually in North Carolina on July 5th. I did not blow up the Georgia Guidestones, but you know what? Whoever did that, my hat's off to you. I think that was brilliant.
Yeah. It's something that I'll probably talk a lot about over the next couple of shows. I went down. It's funny because I just really went down the Guidestone rabbit hole maybe 6 or 7 months ago. I really didn't know much about him prior to that. And then I went down the rabbit hole. I was like, oh man, where's Alex Jones when you need him, dude? This is bad, and then within 6 months, someone blew him up and I'm like, all right, dude, cool. Now I think it's very interesting that someone blew them up. They have cameras on those things all the time. All they got was a very short snippet of a car driving away, but they should have video of the people who blew it up. And also, I find it interesting that only one column went down, yet they destroyed the whole rest of it, and then haven't said anything about the time capsule or anything like that. So pretty crazy stuff, man. Definitely.
I found that very interesting as well, as the fact that it wasn't completely knocked down, but yet they destroyed it. So I think everyone watching this show should probably say a prayer for the person who did it, because that's an American hero. Yeah. And while I don't support criminal activity and all those things, whoever blew up the Georgia Guidestones, Godspeed to you.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people online saying, what was so bad about him? I don't get it. I'm like, it's literally a guide to eugenics, dude. Legitimately. You just read it one time and be like, and tell me that's a good thing. 500 million people in perpetual balance with nature? Come on, dude. Come on.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
That means we're all dead. That's what that means.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Josh, I'm a big fan, man. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
No, Josh, hey, thank you. And we look forward to working with you as well.
Hell yeah, man.
Party. We've had lots of conversations offline here. We're super excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I'll be talking. We have our next quarterly meeting at last weekend of this month in Alexandria, Virginia, where our headquarters is. And so that's something that I'm going to bring up to the board when I'm there and talk about how we can move forward and work with Freedom Flyers and your guys' causes, man. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, Josh.
No, thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
All right, guys, another awesome episode of Break the Cycle. Josh, super cool. Please go support usfreedomflyers.org. I think it's a wonderful thing that they're doing. It's something that more people should be doing, but I'm happy that they're leading the charge in the flight industry. It's pretty scary to think about, man. I fly a lot. And to think about that anytime, one of those pilots or both pilots decide that they're going to pass out or go down, that could harm me and my family, man. So definitely go support these people and their mission. It's great stuff. Guys, please go check out toplobster.com, the man, the myth, the legend, my good friend and partner on Break the Cycle, where you can get all kinds of great hand-drawn hats, backpacks, hoodies, t-shirts. I think he's got some I don't know, girls' pants, socks, all kinds of cool stuff. All the good art that you've seen for my show, you can get there. Of course, all the other cool shows that he does art for, and all of his original designs as well. Go pick all that up by using BTC at checkout for a 10% discount, or become a member of my Patreon, my Subscribestar, or my YouTube channel under all of my videos by hitting the join link, where you can get into the private Discord server and get all of Top Lobster's new gear. If he ever puts any out, Top, up to 2 weeks early before it goes to the general public at a 30% discount. Really, really good stuff, man. Definitely worth it. And of course, check out executive producer of the show, anthemplanning.com, for all your emergency and crisis planning needs. Check them out today. See what they can do for your business, home, or personal life. They're doing a wonderful job that the government has historically sucked at, much cheaper and much more efficiently. Seriously, if you own a business, go check them out right now, as soon as the show ends. And of course, Extreme Timeline, new podcast, where a good friend of mine is going back and watching all of is it WEC stuff, the World Extreme wrestling, watching all of that, and doing a podcast on it. Good stuff. He's going to be a temporary sponsor of the show. If you're listening to this, there's already been an audio ad for it as well, but definitely go check it out if you're into that kind of stuff. I promise you're going to like it. They're very good at what they do. Guys, I'm just happy to be back, happy to be doing shows. Going to try and reschedule the Primetime 99 Alex Stein show next week. Of course, that will be a wonderful show, but until then, don't forget to break the cycle.
Due to legal reasons, I just have to explain. The lyrics of my last song may seem to contain a violent call to action in the verse and refrain, but I just meant it in Minecraft. The helicopter part was in reference to GTA 5 and the things you do. So any violence you commit, I am not an excuse, because I just meant it in Minecraft. A chipper is my friend and he's constantly cold. Accusations of incitement getting totally old. Make your own choices, yeah, you have control, because I just meant it in Minecraft. Obviously I would never advocate force, unless there's due process and a trial, of course. And if you're convicted, we will make you a corpse in Minecraft, just in Minecraft. Nothing I mean, you know it. No